everyone. We made it. Sorry that we are late. StreamYard is having an issue. I swear it was not me. Look who's here with me. I don't know which side. I'm going to say you're on that side. Brian Rundle. He's here. He's here on the Quest show.
Lana, you know how thrilled I always am to come on the Quest show. I put on a nice shirt even today. And I will say this whole thing was my fault. We're like Trump, when he goes to those rallies, he shows up whenever he wants to. So do we.
We're just like, yeah, we're going to be fashionably late. That's what we said.
No question.
Anyway, welcome to the Quest show. We want to keep this going because we do have a special guest today. But before that is Lauren Boebert's district. So that is how important this interview is. So please like, share, subscribe, share. And I will add his, like I said, we had problems in the beginning, so I'm going to have to go back in and add John's information, his pages, and where you can donate and help his campaign. But I'm going to stop talking unless Brian has something to add, and we're going to...
I think we should probably hop into it since we're a little bit late.
We're late, right, exactly. Good idea.
Yep.
Hi, John.
Hey.
Good to see you again.
You too. Glad we got it working.
Yes, we did get it working. We have kept John way too long. So we're just going to hop right in. John, before we get started into the political aspect of all of this stuff or the political muck, I just want to ask you how you got started. Like, what was that thing that said, you know what? Something needs to be done here. I want to jump into politics because politics is it's an ugly game.
Yeah, so that's a story that I probably don't have enough time to tell, so I'll try to condense it the best that I can. Really, the catalyst for me was action, hardships within my own life and action within my community. When I was 19, I was injured in a really bad car accident. My head smashed through the windshield. I was prescribed opioids for long-term pain management, and I had no idea what I was getting myself into. My life after that accident spiraled out of control. I struggled with physical and mental addiction as a result of that injury, and I almost lost my marriage, my family, my home, my career, and everything. I rebuilt my life from the ground up because I had incredible people around me and a really strong desire to get better. But not everybody has that. And I saw that firsthand. And after I recovered, I wanted to find ways to give back to my community. And I connected with a top-of-the-line addiction recovery center within my community. And I started showing up to meetings and public outreach events. And they were working on something really cool called the Second Chance program. And it was a drug diversion program that was centric around keeping nonviolent drug offenders out of prison. Before long, I ended up being a spokesman. And I got to meet with state representatives and senators and county commissioners and police officers and sheriffs to share my story, my hardships, my experiences, and give my perspective on how we could build a better and more just society. That battle led me to the state capitol where I originally lived in Pennsylvania. It led me to the nation's capital in Washington, all up and down the East Coast. Out here in Colorado, I've continued that mission. And that was really the spark for me, where I realized that I know how to organize, that I'm a good messenger, and that politics lacks working people with lived experiences. And that was kind of the main primary driver that really threw me into this.
Wow, that's a crazy story. Like, wow, thank you for sharing that. Brian, do you have any questions? Because I got a ton of them. So
yeah, I do actually. Just based on a few things that you said. The first thing is that you said the two words "lived experiences," and I hear a lot of people on the right talk about the so-called lived experiences that they pretend to care about, but there's somebody like you who actually went through it, and you can relate with people on those lived experiences. Even though it's a couple districts for you, do you believe that lived experience helps you with people who otherwise might not consider voting for you?
Hands down, because the common denominator is that regardless of people's political ideology and affiliation, they're tired of the status quo. They're looking for working class candidates that have those lived experiences. I grew up in a highly conservative community with a conservative family. And so I know how to message, I know how to talk to those folks. I grew up on Medicaid and food stamps after my dad got MS when I was 5 years old. I know what it's like to struggle. I know what
I
it's
don't
like
know
to
what
work multiple jobs just to keep the lights on. So, absolutely, connecting with those working class folks that have really shifted towards Donald Trump over the last couple years is one of my biggest missions.
Wow. So, with that being said, segue, what are your 3 top priorities for Colorado's 4th district?
Yeah, I can summarize it. I've taken a lot of time to really integrate like what my main platform is for the community, but also trying to balance the needs at the national level. Because one of the biggest reasons I'm excited to run for Congress is I don't get to just help out people in Eastern Colorado. I
Right,
get to write policies and use my
right,
platform to improve everybody's life across the whole
right,
country. So
right,
if you ask me what it is primarily in Colorado for, I like to say that it starts with local impact and local solutions, kind of reconnecting the rural strength with the urban opportunity, talking about the bad trade deals, the reckless tariffs that have slammed our farmers and driven up costs, and the very businesses that really keep our communities alive. I don't think that we can afford to pay the price for decisions made by out of touch
right,
politicians.
right.
And so that is a huge focus to me to resuscitate fair trade, to rebuild strong supply chains, and to really put forward policies that benefit our small business owners. The second trickle down, I would say, is protecting working families. I think that we really have to fight for the heart of our communities. Like I mentioned, growing up in a working class town where, I always say that one factory closing could tear a family apart. I've seen
Yeah,
what happens when small towns get left behind. I've seen it all over Eastern Colorado. And so, really supporting blue collar workers, farmers, and ranchers here in Eastern Colorado is huge. And then I really tie it into building stronger communities. I believe that if it's made in America, it needs American leadership to succeed. So I want to prioritize our family-owned farms and our factories, help create real jobs, boost wages, and create real strength for our communities. And that means that you have to work across party lines in a community like I live in. You have to work with a lot of Republicans and conservative mayors and state
right.
representatives, and that's something that I'm committed to doing.
Yeah. And that was a question of mine. How do you do that? Because the Republican Party, this Republican Party, seems to absolutely refuse to work with Democrats. So what's going to make you different going into Congress? Like, how are you going to introduce yourself and make them want to work with you?
For sure. So when I talked a little bit about that Second Chance program and kind of how I led that community advocacy, that wasn't with Democrats, that was all with Republicans. So I really learned how to connect with those folks, how to talk about the issues. And to be honest, it takes a lot of practice. What I'm doing now is something that I call the
Yeah,
Local Leaders Tour
yeah.
here in Eastern Colorado. And I am connecting with Republican mayors, Republican state representatives, with senators. I reach out to them and I say, our country is in a dark spot right now. I think that we've lost our way. We've lost the ability to be able to sit across the table and shake somebody's hand and look at them in the eye and not just talk about our differences, but talk about what actually unites us. So I'm doing that every single day. And I've had a couple folks tell me, John, you're the first Democrat ever in this district that's reached out to me for a meeting. You're the first one that's ever taken 3 hours to drive down to our little rural community and meet with us. So I think that once I get in front of those folks, they realize that I'm in it for the right reasons, that I care, that my heart's in the right place. And I'm not a fan of bipartisanship for the sake of bipartisanship,
Right.
but I do believe that it's missing in our country. So for me, it's a lot of practice. It's differentiating myself from other folks out there that might rubber stamp policies, on one side of the political aisle. I really just try to connect with folks. I try to find our common denominators and what would unite us rather than what shifts us apart, and really kind of maintaining that focus of, servant leadership within our community.
Right. Brian, yeah.
But it's not easy. I don't want to dismiss your
Yeah, no,
question.
no,
Yeah.
I don't expect it will be.
Yeah, John, real quick, I want to ask you, based on what you said earlier about you were prescribed opioids by a doctor, it led to a dependency. Prior to that, did you have any ambition to be in politics or follow politics? and it kind of went away because of that dependency, and then you got it back? Or did that open your eyes to getting into something like this?
No, that's an awesome question. So growing up, my dad was a very, very independent community leader. He kind of led both aisles of the political spectrum. He was a carpenter. You know, he always said that he should have been a lawyer, and nobody ever argued with him because they were bound to lose that one. So I would say that my dad really shaped my political involvement and ideology from a young age. I never ever had a desire to get into politics whatsoever in my life. My first involvement with politics, I would say, was when I was 18 years old, and I met a really good group of veterans who were really, really passionate about exposing some of the atrocities that were going on in Afghanistan and Iraq and the Middle East. And once I connected with those folks and I learned what they went through, and I learned the real reasons that we went to war for the corporate military industrial complex, that kind of lit up light bulbs in my mind. And I, started to show up at protests with those folks, caused some good trouble, got arrested a few times with no charges filed, things like that. So like my political involvement stems from being an activist. And yes, that did dissipate quite a bit when I dealt with all of my hardships and my struggles. And that was one of the reasons that I kind of catapulted back into it when I started to rebuild my life.
Good.
Do you remember who you voted for first? Like, that was just a random question.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the first presidential election I ever voted in was Obama and McCain, and I voted for Obama.
Yeah, that's cool.
He came to our college, so I got to hear from him, firsthand perspective, and I knew that I was already against a continuation of George Bush's policies because of how much I learned about, his foreign policy in 9/11. That was kind of what piqued my interest.
Isn't it?
And then he had that little hurricane in the middle of it too.
Yeah. How about that?
Yeah. But isn't it interesting how we look back on those days and it's like, oh my God, we would have never voted for like John McCain, over Obama. But now it's like, oh my God, if only we had a John McCain. Like, what?
Things have changed so much in 20 years. It's unrecognizable.
It really is. Like, John McCain must be rolling it. Like now I'm like, oh my God, Bush, McCain, give me any Republican, just not these guys. Well, they're not really Republicans either, but
no, the party's completely transformed.
Indeed.
Yeah, I want to switch a little bit to gun violence. So this isn't me from memory. This is me looking stuff up. So you can correct me if I'm wrong. Colorado is among the top 20 states. That's their ranking in gun deaths right now. It says a significant portion of these deaths are due to suicides, the leading cause of death among teens. You're averaging 84 deaths per year and several mass shootings. Like, and it's ridiculous because I know that there were, and I'm like, oh, there's so many, like I just forget where they are. But Lauren Boebert co-sponsored a bill to designate the AR-15 as the national gun of the United States. And she's voiced opposition to Colorado because you guys recently enacted like red flag laws.
We've had red flag gun laws on the books for a while, but we did just enact probably and arguably the most restrictive gun laws in the nation.
And she voted against it. Like she did. Like it's just
she represents, the most radical and extreme elements of people that live in this amazing state. There is a great Western culture here. There's a huge culture around guns, with the ranchers and the farmers and people that hunt and such, or shoot competitively. But she does not speak for everybody. I seldom meet a gun owner here in Colorado that does not support common sense firearm laws. That's just the reality.
What sets you apart from Lauren Boebert? I mean, I know there's like a million thousand things.
I'll focus on the guns. So for starters, send me your address. I'll make sure you get my family's Christmas card. I promise we'll be posing with our dog in the mountains. There won't be any AR-15s or shotguns or pistols on our side. I don't feel the need to, placate it like that into the universe and make sure that everybody sees that. What sets me apart is I'm not toxic. I'm not divisive. I actually believe in family values. I believe in the Christian values that she preaches. You know, I actually believe
Right.
in feeding people that need it the most, taking care of the sick, the homeless folks. That's what I believe, and that's what sets us apart. Is I'm in this not to enrich myself or to give my wife a $500,000 a year under the table salary from the oil and gas companies, or to, you know, be a Cinco pimp for Trump. But I want to look out for folks in my community. I want to improve their lives. I want to take care of working families. I want to make sure that children are safe to go to school. I want to make sure that people are safe when they go to the grocery store, that anybody who works 40 hours a week can afford housing, health care, and basic human rights and necessities. She could care less about any of that.
No, for sure. You have a question, Brian?
I do. I was looking in your district there. It looks like you have about 17% of registered Democrats there, about 37 Republicans, and there's 42 unaffiliated. I'm assuming, or 42, 43% unaffiliated. I would assume, and you could correct me if I'm wrong, I would assume part of that is because of the way they do the primaries there, that if you are unaffiliated, you can vote in either or both primaries. But is because of such a disparity there and a discrepancy, obviously you're going to have to do more than most candidates do. I also did see an early poll. It was one of the Democratic candidates that is running against you in the primary that looked like they had an early lead against Lauren Boebert. So it looks like that could actually be possible, that a Democrat could win. And we have plenty of time to figure out who that nominee is going to be. So just based on early, and I think all of us agree at this point anymore, the polls, we don't pay attention to much. But if we see good news, we want to take it in a little bit and understand that there is some, possibility here. So that being said, in your district, because I live in a very tough district too, where it's almost impossible for a Democrat to win in the state of Florida. That being said, what is it that you're going to do different and extra on top of what everybody else would be doing?
Sure.
No pressure.
Yeah, right. No pressure at all. So just for clarity, because there's a lot of confusion in that was a poll from the 2024 cycle. And that poll that you're reciting came from Gravis Marketing, which has one of the largest margins of error in political polls beyond. So as far as it goes on that front, I think that poll was completely discredited. I believe it was a push poll. So the numbers have changed a little bit. You were pretty much right on with the disparity between Republicans and Democrats. But the one phenomenon that happens cycle after cycle is the independent voters increase. We're now up to about 47% of the district being unaffiliated. We have open primaries, so those folks get to choose whether they want to vote in the Republican or the Democratic primary. What I hear on the ground is a lot of those folks are tired of the two-party system. They're tired of the partisan gridlock that we see. They might not, fit a mold a little bit. A lot of people feel politically homeless. They might not identify with every Democratic policy that's coming out of Denver here. Democrats have majority control here in the state, but they might not fit into the Republican box either. So I think a lot of folks really feel politically homeless. And I think that's why you're seeing the unaffiliated numbers increase year after year. That presents an advantage to a Democrat running in this district, because there's a lean from the independent voters where they actually side towards more liberal and democratic ideology. In fact, a lot of them that I've met shy away from the Democratic Party because they haven't seen progressive enough policy come forward. They want to see housing initiatives and healthcare for all, and really kind of bold solutions that shake away from the status quo. So you're right. I mean, I have to work my butt off. I need moderate Republicans in my corner to be able to win. We have to absolutely command the independent voters. And the way that I do that is by appealing to them all the way around. I like to tell everybody that, I'm progressive, but that doesn't mean far left. I'm very in the middle with my policies. And so I think when we get out and Democrats tend to live in what I call an echo chamber in this district a lot. They don't want to go into those really red partisan towns and talk to those people. They don't want to show up to their community events and hold town halls and engage on the issues that matter the most to them. It's very easy to go to the more liberal pockets of the district and where we feel safe. We cannot win this district by doing that. So I'm making sure that I hold a town hall in all 21 counties in this district, and all of those towns that often feel forgotten, that you have to drive 3 or 4 hours to, with no gas station on the way to sit down and show up, to bring my family along, to answer their questions, to make those connections. to show up at their community days. And that's really how we're going to do it. We're going to get into these tough areas and we're going to sit down and talk with these folks.
Are you seeing that with the independents and maybe even some of the Republicans? We just saw Donald Trump's latest approval rating was at 38% with the Quinnipiac poll. Are they helping your cause already with those people in that area?
Absolutely. Absolutely. There's a lot of people on the more moderate end of the Trump spectrum or the MAGA spectrum, whatever you would consider it. I'm sure they voted for Trump, but there's a lot of veterans that are really, really sad to see what's going on right now. Yeah. The breakup between Elon Musk and Donald Trump. I mean, there was a rancher recently somewhere that I was, and they despise green energy here. A lot of conservative folks do in Eastern Colorado. We are the oil and gas capital of the state. We're one of the largest oil producers in the whole country. He went out and bought a $100,000 Tesla because he was so happy that Elon Musk, helped Donald Trump get elected. So if we can convince conservative folks to go out there and buy electric vehicles, all cards are on the table.
Right, right.
Oh my God. So during your travels, traveling to those ruby red towns, do you speak about the big, beautiful bill? And do you let people know what's really in it? Like, hey, Medicaid is going to be cut by billions. SNAP is going to be cut. And with this question, how will that impact, the people of Colorado? Because what are your Medicaid percentages?
I don't know it off the top of my head, but it's immense. It would be well over 100,000 folks. And a lot of our rural hospitals here are completely dependent on Medicaid. If Medicaid cuts happen, those hospitals are shutting down.
How are they responding? Like when you tell them, did they not know?
People know, but here's the reality. There's that certain flank of the MAGA base that they're so indoctrinated with the propaganda that it doesn't matter because Trump and the MAGA base are online just talking about the most absolute nonsense garbage, and they just believe it. I've had people tell me, John, I'll believe it when I see it. And to be honest, I think that if that bill passes, they're going to see it. They're going to experience it firsthand. They're going to watch the rural hospitals get shuttered. They're going to have to drive to Denver for all of their care. There's some really, really hard economic times ahead for folks. So I try to talk about that more so to the people that are receptive to it. I spend a little less time talking to the people that tell me I love Lauren Boebert and I love Donald Trump and nobody can change my mind. So that I think the propaganda is a powerful tool.
Yeah, that's just so unfortunate. It's just like with FEMA, it's like he has convinced people that FEMA bad, Trump good. That's just so incredible. Oh, we lost Brian. He has thunderstorms. He's in Florida, so he probably
happening here too.
Yeah, he probably lost here he is. Yeah, he has convinced people you don't need FEMA. So now he's like, the federal government's not going to help you anymore. The state's going to take care of it. And it's just like, they're just, okay. It's like, okay, you have no house. What is happening here? It's so, Brian and I talk about it all the time. It's like, you want to just bang your head on anything, all of the stuff, because what's wrong with you people? You're cutting off your noses to spite your face. I don't.
Absolutely. I fully believe that a lot of these policies are intentional. There's a plan to structurally reshape the government from the ground up and the role that it plays in our lives. There's a huge effort to defund the very institutions that we depend on as Americans. There is a strategic effort to undermine the social safety nets that have maintained families like mine for generations, to weaken us so that they can really impose their authoritarian will on the country.
Where are we? You have a question, Brian?
Yeah, I mean, and we were talking about this a little bit before we came on. So this is obviously, anybody that has been following this knows that this is not something new for the Republican Party. This is something they've been trying to do for decades. And they have finally found the formula to cross that finish line. And part of that formula comes from a media machine that has absolutely no problems getting on board with this destruction, really, of the United States. You have it started with the radio guys, the Rush Limbaughs of the world. Then it goes right into the Fox Newses of the world, who've gotten worse and worse and worse. I mean, they were dead in the middle of telling everybody that the election was stolen, and they had to pay up $787 million because of that.
Yeah.
Then when you expand it to social media, you expand it to YouTube channels, except for the Quest Show, which is phenomenal. And then unqualified and unregulated podcasters who are now the go-tos on politics, who know nothing about it, have destroyed the brains of too many people in this country. And sometimes I believe it is so difficult to beat them that I don't know how from this point on, because they're not going anywhere. How do we step back now and figure out how to take them on? Because the left will never have the ecosystem that the right does. Now they'll grow, like people like the Midas Touch and places like that. We will grow and get our message out there. And by the way, Lana and I talked about this before. People do have to remember, the Democrats, when they lose, they barely lost. People have to remember, Kamala Harris barely lost. It may have been a couple 100,000 votes that changed this whole thing.
100 days, right? With 100
on 100 days. Elon Musk spent all that money in Wisconsin and got blown out in the Supreme Court race. So there is correct messaging out there, but speak on, because we were talking about it a little bit before, the right-wing propaganda machine that is out there. What do you think is the best way to handle that? And I'm interested to hear your answer on going forward against that.
I think this is the $1 million question. This one comes up more often than not when I talk to folks, and I have to bow my head a little bit because I don't know. I don't know what it looks like, but when I envision how we can actually, we have to wage a rebellion against that misinformation. And what I've noticed is we need young people now more than ever to influencers on TikTok that are holding YouTube channels. We need to really find out what we can do to get young folks more involved in this, because the Gen Z and the millennials right now, they're the salvation to our nation. If we can rope in that generation that feels so disaffected and disenfranchised by politics and let them, how many people sat out this last election? That was the real candidate that won. What was it? 81 million people? I don't know. I'm throwing a number out, but those are the people that we need to capture. The people that thought, you know what, my voice doesn't matter, my vote doesn't count, nothing's going to change. We need young people to explode on TikTok, to take over the social media waves. Social media is owned by Mark Zuckerberg. It's owned by Elon Musk. We need to amplify the liberal platforms like Blue Sky to mirror everything that they've done, but we need to build off of that. The way that I see the most fundamental change happening in the country right now that can kind of tie into that is a lot of these indivisible groups that have sprung up, that 5051, the resistance projects all over the country that are showing up to the No King's Day protests. Those protests are the catalyst. They're the spark for organization that we're talking about. They're bringing younger people and they're bringing disaffected voters in. But we really, really need to put our heads together. Liberal people, Democrats, when we win an election, we get really lazy. We give up a lot of our infrastructure.
Absolutely.
We give up a lot of our activism. We grew way too comfortable with Joe Biden being in the White House for 4 years. We grew very comfortable when Obama got elected, and we lost all those ecosystems that we set up. The Democratic Party needs its own Tea Party movement. That's how they got to MAGA today. The Democrats need to shed the intergenerational gatekeepers out of the party, and young folks like myself that are ready to take the reins need to step up and get even more aggressive. And we need to mold and shape the party into a party of the future rather than a relic of the past. So I believe that it's a multifaceted approach, but we need to amplify our social media messaging.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that, because it is sort of a younger person's game now, especially with the social media and all this stuff. Let me ask you real quick. One strategy I love personally, I think somebody like Pete Buttigieg going on the Andrew Schultz show. the way he handled that entire, I don't know if you had a chance to watch it, but it should be sort of a blueprint, I think, on how Democrats should handle this, because they're going to the people who are spreading this disinformation. Pete Buttigieg had to explain to them that millions of dead people over the age of 100 were not getting paid Social Security, and they were in shock.
Yeah.
And these are the people the younger generation listen to and get their political news from. So they go out and vote on garbage like this, or boys playing in girls sports, or open borders, which doesn't exist. So I think getting in front of them I find to be a great strategy, especially with a messenger like Pete Buttigieg, who I find to be fantastic as a messenger.
Hands down. So one of the biggest things I think is that we need to go on the Joe Rogan podcast.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to agree with him, but you need to go on there. You need to go on the conservative radio talk shows. They're here all over Eastern Colorado. They're all over the country. We need to find that common ground again, or at best, we need to get better at controlling the messaging, because the right and the Republicans, they dominate and they control that message, and they're unified. It doesn't matter if you talk to a Republican in Pennsylvania or Eastern Colorado, they are in very much so alignment with their cultural ideology and their policy platforms. You talk to a Democrat in California versus Florida and Montana, we're on completely different ends of the spectrum quite often. So go into those tough spaces and have those difficult conversations.
I feel like the problem oftentimes with that is that, and we talked about this, Brian, is that Republicans are like one brain. They just follow. They follow the leader, whatever that memo says. And even you can see it with MAGA, right? They watch Fox News. If Fox News is saying Biden sent condoms to Gaza to make bombs, all of them think the same thing. Whereas Democrats, we think we have critical thinking. So I think it's a little tougher. Like, we want the same thing, but we all have different ways of trying to get there. And I think that's always problematic. And I am one of those older people who get so frustrated with young people who want to be excited, because I think, like, yeah, I get you want someone to be excited about, but you also should be excited about keeping your rights to choose what's happening with your body, because that excites me, right? Like, so I feel like from the time young people are like teens or whatever, I feel like they're not taking civics classes. They don't know anything about civics. They don't understand local government. And whenever, I interview a local politician, one of the questions is that, what are you doing to get messaging to the community? Because those people, say like in Alabama, Lowndes, Alabama, with no friggin' indoor plumbing, right? Like, they just go, well, that's just the way it is. It's not going to change and then they think it's because of Biden, because they don't understand. And I think that's what kind of makes them depressed and not excited, and thinking that there's nothing that they can do, because they think that the presidential election is end all be all, and they skip the things that they actually can change.
I agree with all that. I do. I think that's by design. I think that they've made a society of less involved, less educated voters, because that's what they want. I think that there's not interest in local government at all. I show up to my town hall meetings all the time, and I'm the youngest person there by 20 years or so. So that's the reality. And then the other aspect that depends on what element of young people you're looking at. I've been working on bringing young people into the party and into politics for the last decade. The common denominator is these folks are too busy trying to survive. They're too busy working multiple jobs to be involved, or to dedicate their mindset to it. And so, like, because we've created such economic disparity, we've pulled people further out of reach from those pockets of political activism and civic engagement. There's people that want to learn, but they're too busy taking care of their children, figuring out how they're going to pay their bills and keep food on the table and healthcare and a roof over their head. So, like, when we have an economy that works for working people, and we can appeal to younger folks more, we can engage them on civics again, but we also have to reform our educational institutions because they've been failing for decades.
Yeah.
Well, that income inequality has been a decades-long plan by the Republicans. And again, the fact that people don't even understand that or don't want to hear it or listen to it drives me up a wall. It just drives me insane. But I think too, with the Democratic Party, sometimes they watch their words too much and they wanted to be careful and they wanted to play by the rules and be fair. I think at this point, we all know that the rules are gone and the rules do not matter anymore. And kind of dancing around MAGA, and we have to appeal to those people as well. To me, I think I'm not really sure if that is something that we need to do anymore. I'm not saying that we don't need to appeal to all Americans. I think we do. I think we all need to appeal to Americans. But Anna and I have talked about this a million times, that the people who are now involved in politics, who think they're the authorities on it, and I'm talking about the voters, are the ones who never were involved in politics their entire lives until Donald Trump came along.
Right.
Because politics was boring. Politics, you had to listen to policy and stuff like that. But now you had a professional wrestler who comes in with his Jerry Springer show, and that's very easy to understand now. So now you have all these people like, I love politics now, and then they go around and talk to us like they know more about it than anybody. So how do you deal with that? How do you deal with the people who are just dead set? Because you're going to come across them, obviously. How do you deal with it? Do you kind of dance around it, or do you just go, listen, you believe what you want to believe, and I understand that, but I'm here to tell you maybe you should just open up your mind to some other thoughts?
Yeah, I've gotten really good at learning where to allocate my limited time and resources to.
Yeah.
And if it's conversations like that, I think we're never going to appeal to those folks. So we agree to disagree, or we find a drop of commonality and then we move on. I think where the messaging war lies is replicating, not replicating, but pushing back on that reality TV style type strategy that you're talking about. Because one thing that comes to mind for me is Bernie Sanders and the Fighting Oligarchy tour. That garnished some of the largest crowds in history. There were young folks, people of all socioeconomic backgrounds. And why? Like, people have asked themselves, why? Bernie Sanders is just a person. Well, he's saying the things that a lot of Democrats are afraid to say. He's fearless to call out the big power players and the money that corrupts both sides of the political spectrum. He talks about very basic ideals and concepts that some perceive as radical. There's this whole strategy that, Democrats are losing. We need to move further to the right to be able to pull back some of those MAGA folks and moderate Republicans. I think the argument is that we need to move further towards progress, not on the left or the right side of the spectrum, but we need to offer people meaningful policies and solutions. We need to focus less on social issues and more on kitchen table issues. That's really what it comes down to for us.
But how do we move that crowd, right? So they are garnering those crowds. So did Kamala. So how do we get that crowd to the voting booth? Because Kamala spoke about the kitchen table issues. She's like, hey, I'm going to help you own a home. Hey, I'm going to help Black entrepreneurs, right? Because we had a whole swath of Black people who decided to vote for Trump because they're like, oh no, not Kamala, right? So he got more of the Black vote. That's not a lot, but he did, right? But she talked about those kitchen table issues endlessly, and had huge crowds. People loved it. This is Beyonce, this. And she's still white men for Kamala, Black women for Kamala, Latinos for Kamala. And we still couldn't move them into the ballot box. I mean, I know some of the issues there, but I'd like you to speak on it. Because you said crowd, Bernie.
Yeah,
see.
You're right. Crowds don't always translate into electoral success. I think that there's so many dynamics to that conversation that you just brought up. I think that it was really tough for her to recalibrate from Joe Biden's incredibly late exit from the race.
Right.
And I say this with the utmost respect. I think what I saw turned a lot of people off was the lack of democratic process during that. We completely bypassed a primary. Okay. I have nothing against Kamala. I voted for her and I'm proud to have voted for her and I'd do it again. But I don't believe the way that they went about it, that Joe Biden made this exit, we didn't have an open nomination process, it really, really locked a lot of people out of the conversation. It really, really did. And we hear a lot from the Republican, or we hear a lot about the Republicans being a threat to democracy. It can also be a perceived threat to democracy, bypassing that basic, essential democratic process. What I saw from Kamala's campaign was, yes, she discussed the kitchen table issues, but I really know firsthand she ostracized a lot of the progressive wing of voters that really, really go out and do the work. She not divided, but she didn't capitalize that coalition enough. She spent a little bit too much time, in my opinion, with Liz Cheney Republicans, and not enough time with the pro-Palestinian, movement here in America that was huge, especially when you talk about the youth voters that really, really didn't vote at all, or voted third party, or whatever they did. So I think there was a lot of strategic errors. I think it was the time frame. You're right. We can't just focus on crowds, but we need to find our party's Donald Trump. We need to find somebody that can motivate the people, and to that extent. And unfortunately, I don't think that was Kamala. It certainly wasn't Joe Biden. They're great people. They would have ushered the country in a completely different direction that we're at now. But we feel leaderless right now. There's this large vacuum at the top, and I don't know what the solution to that is.
Yeah, we'll get there. I have absolute faith that we'll work.
Yeah, like I said, I think there's still this idea that the Democratic Party is dead because they lost to Donald Trump, but there are plenty of Democrats that won across the country during this last election. And again, in a lot of special elections since then, Democrats have won. So, and I want to go back real quick. I wasn't, the crowd thing, I agree with the crowd thing. That could be, I don't compare what Bernie Sanders did to the Jerry Springer thing the way Donald Trump does it, because Bernie Sanders actually has a message. Donald Trump's message is, do you want to get eaten by a shark, or do you want to get electrocuted by a battery? I mean, so, that's the Jerry Springer part that I'm, certainly referring to. But I think that part of the Democratic Party too, what they do is when they lose, it's kind of like they sulk and say, I want to take my ball and go home, instead of just kind of saying, you know what? All right, we lost. Let's shake ourselves off. I'm of the mindset, because I hear this too much in the Democratic Party, is looking back. I'm done looking back. I'm ready to look forward. We were talking earlier about the difference between what they do and what we do. When they do it, they're all on the same page. They could all hate each other, but they are all going to say the same exact message. Our side, we have too many intellects in the room that need to tell everybody, well, this is how it needs to be done. This is how it needs to be done. It breaks my heart. Lon and I talked about this the other day when Jon Stewart, his first day, came back to the Daily Show, just blasted Biden the entire time. I'm like, well, and then at the end says, well, no matter what happens in this election, everything's going to be fine. Well, obviously that's not true. Anybody could have won other than Donald Trump, and I think we would have been in a much better place. But I think moving forward, all of us being on the same page, and regardless of whether or not, let's say, John, even you say something that maybe I disagree with, on this point, from this point forward, doesn't matter. I agree with John. He's the candidate. We go forward with John, and we need him to win. And that's the sort of attitude I'd like to see the Democratic Party have more and more. And real quick, going back to Pete Buttigieg, I don't know if he said something on stage perfectly the other day when he said, if we said that we were going to go far left, the right-wing media would just say that we are going to be socialist. So if we go right to center, or just a little bit left to center, they're still going to say that we're socialists. So why not just do our message and say it the way we want to say it?
Yeah, this conversation, I've been in too many rooms where we've had it, and I feel the same way. Like, if you have a D next to your name, they're going to label you a socialist. So let's embrace progressive policy that offers people basic human rights, that subsidizes, post-secondary education, that gives everybody equal access to healthcare, affordable housing initiatives, criminal justice reform, a foreign policy that actually puts America first. Let's stop being so afraid of what the fallout's going to be if we live up to our values, and let's live up to them. Let's define a clear message and a path forward. I'm glad you said that. We do spend way too much time looking back. I no longer care about the 2024 election. I care about what happens in 2026. But I know that we have to bring the working families back into the mix, because if you pay attention to polling, there's no doubt that people trust Republicans more with their economic interest right now.
This
And
is
that's
crazy.
something that we have to dig into.
Well, that's another thing too I wanted to say really quick is that that's one thing that I kind of hear too much on the left is that we blame the Democratic Party all the time. And that's not to say that there isn't blame. There's always blame when you lose, right? And there's always things that you can certainly point out. But for me personally, and I know you probably can't go around on the campaign trail and say things like this, but I blame the voters. The voters are not doing enough to understand exactly what it is they're voting for. They don't understand. They're going into a ballot box saying, well, I don't want my boy playing against a girl in sports. I'm like, do you understand the percentage of that happening?
No.
And I even asked them, I know it's a touchy subject, but I said it's more data.
Oh, oh, those thunderstorms.
They must be good.
Seriously. Or we can do conspiracy theories and say, you know, the Republicans.
Suppressing everything.
Yeah.
Somebody was cutting me off.
That's what we just said is we can't blame Elon.
But you get the gist of what I was saying.
Yeah.
I totally get the gist.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I talk about this all the time. There's, you know, Colorado is especially Eastern Colorado, it's very, very farming and ranching centric. And these farmers and ranchers, they continually vote against their own economic interests time and time and time again. The tariffs are stamping them out of existence. Family farms and ranches aren't going to exist in another 2 years. The immigrant labor that they depend on is drying up. I mean, they're in a world of hurt right now, and they're going to experience that pain, but they will still most of the time go to the ballot box and check it for the Republican because of those social issues, or those they turn into single issue voters. So absolutely, the voting population bears responsibility, but it really is reflective in our society as a whole. Politics has become so toxic, so divisive. The mainstream media has just weaponized it so much and normalized all of this, the fallacies that we see day in and day out. A lot of people live in the algorithm world where they're living in an echo chamber where the algorithm is just feeding them nonsense over and over and over again and not ever challenging their perspectives. Then there's people like me who I personally make sure I go out of my way to alter my algorithm to get into those uncomfortable spaces. But not everybody's that way. Some people, it's easier to take the red pill and wake up every day in your bed and believe whatever it is you want to believe. So I think we have to address that as well.
That's unfortunate, but we're going to wrap it up. I do have some lightning round questions before we end it.
Fun.
Yeah, just a couple, because it's 8:00 and I don't want to take any more of your time. Brian, do you have anything else that you want to ask him before I do the lightning round question?
No, I appreciate his answers, and I think, you know, I love hearing that it is not just saying what it is you want to do, but also attacking what the narrative is of just the party, the people, and what people believe about Democrats, that where even some Democrats are afraid to admit they're Democrats because they're buying into the right-wing propaganda media.
Yeah, and that's the thing that is starting to drive me crazy, because they're listening to anti-woke, DEI, and now here they are like, oh, we're getting too woke, and it's like, that's not even your term to talk about. Stop playing right now. This is disturbing. Like, why?
I never heard a group of dudes, by the way, who keep talking about masculinity, and they're coming out of the mouths of people like Jesse Waters and Tim Pool, and I'm just like, what makes you think you're the masculine dudes? What?
No, it's just, you don't have to tell someone you're a man. Like, geez,
it's just weird. It's just so weird.
Very weird.
Well, thank you, John.
Anytime. Happy to be here. And I'm happy to push back on the narrative too. That has to be done. We need to find messengers. We need to become better messengers.
And I do appreciate that you are going into all of those ruby red towns and doing the things that Lauren Boebert refuses to do. Like, she wants, it's like you're taking the hard road. She wants to just go where she's loved already, and you're like, no, I'm going where people need me, right? Because it's about, like, the constituents need us. It's not about how it makes you feel.
Exactly.
It's about them. So that's
And that's really the only opportunity to grow. She'll never grow. She'll never change because she'll never listen to people with a different identity or outlook or perspective. I want to learn from those people, even though we don't agree. It does make me a better person, and it helps me understand the trajectory of our country. And it also, I have 3 children that are watching. It's not even that you agree with these people, but what I've noticed is when you talk to folks, especially on the far right, there's a lot of people in the room that are observing you. They're just observing that you're cordial to them, that you can disagree with them, that you can treat them like human beings. And that helps win over the support little by little.
Yeah, of course. Lightning round, 801. Let's be done. All right, first question. If Congress had a talent show, what would be Boebert's act and what would be yours?
Gosh. I mean, hers would be, fishing with an AR-15 and a harpoon on the end of it or something. Talent show for me, I'm a very good avid skier. I love to ski, and that would be something I'd be really happy to highlight.
Well, you are in Colorado, so that makes sense. Describe this current administration in 3 emojis.
3 emojis. A nuclear bomb, a radioactive symbol, and flames.
See, I would have been like, poop.
There's a lot of variations, isn't there?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. What's the weirdest thing you've heard on a campaign trail?
The weirdest thing I've heard what I just heard yesterday from a really, really nice woman who seemed to have really good values is she told me how much she loves Lauren Boebert and wants her daughter to be just like her.
Oh, God.
That, as a dad who has a daughter, that was really, really difficult for me to hear.
Did she not see the video?
How do you not? I'm sure she knew about it. The whole country knew about it.
It was fake news, though, because CNN was on the bottom of it. So if CNN showed the video, it was fake.
Oh gosh, yeah, that is, by the way, yeah, that is the weirdest thing. Last question: if you could tweet one law into existence, what would it be?
One law into existence. Geez,
tough one.
It would have to be around ethical reforms. Like for me, the crucifix of the problem is corruption in Congress. It's the money. It's the big money that speaks to people. So I would tie in, I would completely prohibit special interest money from being in the equation, but I would tie in congressional salaries to the state of the economy, to the minimum wage, to, that they're receiving the same benefits that we are, shelling out the same amount of money for excessive healthcare premiums, that they don't have access to a pension, that they're on a level playing field. Whatever the average American worker is making, that's what you're going to make. So it would incentivize actually building an economy that worked for everybody and not just the top 1%.
Ooh, oh, that was a fantastic answer. This is very thought out.
That's a tough one, though. I have a lot in my head that
but that encompasses so much. Like, when you start there and you get that money out of politics, that's going to make a big difference.
John, real quick, did you see the documentary Dark Money Game on HBO?
I did see that.
Unbelievable, right?
Amazing. Yeah, It really, I've been onto it for a while, but that just kind of put everything into perspective for me. I've
both parts.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the root of all our problems.
Yep.
Money. You can trace when you talk about housing, healthcare, foreign conflicts, everything. Our political system at large, it's money. If you remove money and that dark influence from the equation, you can actually build something that works.
Yeah.
And not even just from Americans. There's dark money coming from other countries. Yeah. And it's just, they're very involved in this. And that's what is very scary.
In the form of Qatari jets and all kinds of incentives, right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yep. Yeah. No, I think we're corrupted by foreign money at every turn. Even if you just look into AIPAC, nothing against Israel at all. I believe they have the right to exist, but I don't believe that they have the right to influence our elections.
Right. Absolutely. Well, it is 8:05. John, thank you for your time. Thank you for being here. This was a great interview. This was fun.
I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, this is very enlightening, and good luck with your campaign. Again, I will go in and I will add your information either tonight or tomorrow, and have people get to your page and find out how they can donate and help out with your campaign.
Perfect. Appreciate that so much. Thank you. Thanks for your time.
You want to mention it now?
Yeah, I will throw it out there.
Yeah. Thank you, Brian.
I got you, Lana.
Thank you. So my website's easy. If you go to Padora, that's Padora for Congress.com. If you don't want to type that in, just type in John Padora right on Google. It'll come up. The donate button's at the top. We have a volunteer form. We are cultivating a huge network of national volunteers in all 50 states. This isn't just an Eastern Colorado issue. Lauren Boebert affects every one of your lives. Yep. If you live in a safe district, a safe blue district, help us out, because we need all the help that we're going to get. So PadoraForCongress.com. Biggest thing you can do right now is hit that volunteer button, hit that donate button, $5, $10. We're in it to help. So appreciate everybody.
Guys, just envision right now the television screen that night with the check mark by John's name next to Lauren Boebert. Just imagine how unbelievably great that would be.
And I don't think people understand that, right? Like, you literally can send the money from anywhere. You don't have to live in Colorado. And like you just said, remember how we're like, these votes impact us all. We have to get the House. We need the Senate. Like, here we are. We have a chance. Getting him over the finish line puts us one step closer.
Yep.
Absolutely. And just to summarize that, like, the path to the House doesn't run through just through the swing districts or through the safe districts. It runs through Eastern Colorado right here in these Republican districts where we have a real opportunity, because we have somebody so vile that everybody throughout the country dislikes so much. So everything Lauren Boebert's going to do is going to affect you. She's going to rubber stamp all the Donald Trump's policies, and I'm going to fight him at every turn.
Yes. Oh, thank you, John.
Good luck, John. We're going to watch you.
Yes,
appreciate you both.
Good luck, John. And come back anytime. Maybe come back when it gets closer.
Heck yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely will. Thanks for the open invite.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Brian.
Thanks, John. Thank you, Lon.
Yep, see y'all.
Thank you.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Good night.
Good night.
Night.